Hey, so here we go. I'm going to start this series of meditations on the book of Life Against Death, the psychoanalytic meaning of history. We can throw the term psychoanalytic out the window. We're just going to kind of read this from the perspective of Norman O'Brown, who was a classicist out of what would we say, like Santa Cruz University professor, knew Greek, Latin, psychedelic guy. Anyways, always love this guy's work. I'm gonna try to integrate this book into the art process, and I will go on tangents. That's all this is, just a tangent after a tangent, and we're just gonna move through this thing. I'm talking as if someone's listening, so forgive me if no one's listening. But if a tree falls, it falls. Here's the table of contents. I tend to read the table of contents to get a good judgment of the whole book. I feel like the titles of chapters are so vague and ambiguous that you can project your hidden desires into what you think the chapter will be about. So Apollo and Dionysus, couch and culture. So as we work through this book, we're only doing this because there's the main book, Love's Body, which is the only book that matters. But for some reason, I feel like we need to read through this in order to get to a better dance, a better intimacy with his book that comes after this, which is called Love's Body. And it's a completely different book. So let's get into, let's see, like the introduction. So we're talking about 1953. There's politics going on, 1953, communism, all sorts of interesting conservatism. Anyway, so we go, I turn to a deep study of Freud. If you don't know Freud, you know enough about him. We're just talking about, you hear Freud, you hear sex, and the frustrations and anxiety of a sexual body in a dance with another sexual body. Also, if there is no other body around, you just have masturbatory fantasies, fetishes. Consciousness extends itself out into the environment, into the horizons of our existence. And in a way, if there is no body out there, we will create a body either through art, through religion, either of those, art or religion. So we can go poet or priest. We're going to keep those two terms isolated, and yet somehow they do influence each other. So the priest influences the poet, or the poet influences the priest. And under these two archetypes, we can arrange prostitution, sex cults, warrior class, kings and queens, father son, mother daughter relationships. So once again, uh, poet priest, art artist, art or religion. So the aim is to open up a new point of view. The task of judicial appraisal, confronting theoretical possibilities with the stubborn facts of present events and past history. So we're really just, we're doing what you're supposed to do as an artist. You go into the past and you revive. Nothing is left without revival. So we're gonna be historians. We're gonna be voyeurs, voyagers, and we're gonna go into there. So to experience Freud is to partake in a second time of the forbidden fruit. So this time around, when this fruit is being tasted, we're gonna have we're gonna try to memorize and have a memory, a memorabilia of that event, that tasting of that forbidden fruit. This book cannot, without sinning, communicate the experience to the reader. So forbidden fruit. As an artist, we must, this term artist. Let's just call it. We're gonna, what was it? Poet priest, poet priest identity. We will experiment with the forbidden. That's the key. And forbidden doesn't need to be drastic. It could be like, I am this. I forbid, you're forbidden to not be you. So as an artist, poet, priest, we experience what it is not to be oneself. So whatever we assume conveniently as our identity, let's exit that. Let's lean out of that assumption and explore. When our eyes are open and the fig leaf no longer conceals our nakedness, our present situation is experienced in its full concrete actuality as a tragic crisis. There's a vulnerability. We let go of the cloth, the reflection. We let go of what is isolating us to be so certain of what it is we are. So, to anticipate the direction of this book, it begins to be apparent that mankind, in all its restless strivings and progress, has no idea of what it really wants. We don't know what we want, but we do have an assumption, a certitude of what is given to us of what we should want. Freud was right, our real desires are unconscious, the forbidden. Our real desires are so forbidden to us we can't recognize them because we are so certain of what we are. It also begins to be apparent that mankind, unconscious of its real desires and therefore unable to obtain satisfaction, is hostile to life and ready to destroy itself. Freud was right in positing a death instinct, and the development of weapons of destruction makes our present dilemma plain. We either come to terms with our unconscious instincts and drives with life and with death, or else we surely die. That's a bold statement, but you don't need to threaten me with death. It's inevitable. But there is something about this thing of going into memory, re-experiencing the forbidden fruit a second time. But even Freud is not enough in the hands of Freud. Psychoanalysis was a living organism in constant evolution. Since Freud's death, orthodox psychoanalysis has become a closed, almost scholastic system, itself no exception to the general cultural trend towards stereotyping and sterility. Rigorous probing reveals that the entire psychological foundation of psychoanalysis need reinterpretation. So yeah, just experiencing the fruit a second time is reinterpretation. So, I mean, we can keep going this, but to what end do we reinterpret? How far should we go? Part 2 and 4 under the heading Eros and Death. Freud is a paradox or nothing. Yeah, the poet-priest dichotomy or this paradox of the both, they're the same thing. The poet seems to be more like Dionysus, and the priest is more Apollo if you're into Nietzsche. But there is a dance between the two. There's a serious part, and then there's a part that's excited for the surprise. The excitement of the surprise would be the poet. The one that needs order and understanding would be the priest. So, and also to have the courage to let go when it becomes apparent that his pioneering map needs to be redrawn, reinterpreted, experiencing the forbidden fruit a second time. Let's keep that in mind. If there is anything from this introduction, let's experience the forbidden fruit a second time as poet, priest, creators. Underlying the crisis of Freudianism is the existential social ambiguity from which Freud himself was not free. Essentially, Freud knew that what he had in hand was either nothing at all or a revolution in human thought. Our ego as artists, as poet, priests, we do want to have a big enough ego to feel this thing that either what we're doing as creators is nothing at all or a revolution. We must strive for something surprisingly new and then bring order to it through the priestly character. So inevitably, all great art ends in the church, and that's my projection. So as we're reading Norman O'Brien, you're gonna probably be frustrated is that I'm gonna overly interpret this stuff because I read things so that I am the author. I'll hide my bibliography or I'll show my bibliography. It doesn't even matter, but I take things and I dress them up in such a way that I created them. That's what you should do also as artists. Take things to such an extent, metabolize them, ingest them to such a level that they are your creation now. Steal the babies. Um, Exoterically, he launched the psychoanalytic movement as a method of therapy controlled by professional adepts and available only to a select and wealthy few. Individuals, moreover, whose usefulness to society was already impaired by an abnormal degree of frustration and mental disorder. We, however, are concerned with reshaping psychoanalysis into a wider general theory of human nature, culture, and history. We're just going to replace psychoanalysis all the time with the identity, the loose, ambiguous identity of poet priest. We must always keep those in mind. Poet priest, art, religion. Art at the beginning is being formulated, being excited. We're playing with it. It's intimate. A few people come around, and then inevitably, if the art is good enough, we repeat it in repetition into a church-like structure. We become priests in the end. Freud, with his genius and his humanity, tried to keep in the field of psychoanalytic consciousness not only the problems of a neurotic patient, but also the problems of mankind as a whole, as is shown by his writings on culture, from Totem and Taboo, Moses and Monotheism. Pick those books up. I read them. They're good. They're short, too. They're like 100 pages each, but I think they're some of Freud's best writing because they're not too dry. They're kind of anytime anytime something's good, I always have to say it's art. I don't consider it science, psychology, sociology, philosophy. If it's good, it's art. So let's keep going. In part one of this book, as a central under which mankind would be cured of the general neurosis, as this book attempts to do in part six, the way out. Indeed, Freud was not fully equipped to make the shift to an anthropological point of view. The primary data on then obtained not from the couch, but from going out into culture. So out from the couch, out from the yoga class into the world, out from the library, out from your study, out from the studio into the world. So there again, poet into priest. The poet is a smaller environment. The poet only needs one person. It's own self hearing its own gibberish, you know. And then if it's big enough, it's grand enough. Even a yoga teacher, all the yoga teachers needs is her, him, their body. That's all they need. And then from the body, we move out and we create the body of the church, the body of the culture. What is needed is a synthesis of psychoanalysis, anthropology, and history. What we need is art. We take all this stuff. We need creation. We need poets. In a pioneering work of significance, second only to Freud. And again, the catastrophe of neo-Freudian psychology should warn us that this synthesis is not to be cheaply won by compromising the difference between psychoanalysis and traditional academic vision. Let's have some fun here. I mean, this book's long, but once again, we got to read this in order to get to Love's Body. A byproduct, but an essential one, of this reinterpretation of psychoanalysis is a reinterpretation of Freud's own position in intellectual history, as long as it regards simply as the founder of a method of individual therapy. Freud and Nietzsche is well known, and Freud himself acknowledged that the poets hadn't anticipated him in the discovery of the unconscious. We are not alone, we have the unconscious. We are not alone, we have the unconscious. We must constantly refer to that. The poet is the unconscious. The priest is the unconscious unfolding into the festival, the church, the dance. It was a surprise to perceive in the course of this study other affinities not generally recognized. First, Freud's methodological affinity with the heretical tradition and logic that can be labeled dialectical. Second is doctrinal affinity with a certain tradition of mystic heresy, of which the most important modern representative is Jacob Boehme. Most generally, the last chapter, The Resurrection of the Body, outlines my view of psychoanalysis as a missing link between a variety of movements in modern thought, in poetry, in politics, in philosophy, all of them profoundly critical of the human character of modern civilization. We will experience the forbidden fruit again, because all modern culture does is create forbidden. It even makes up this idea of forbidden as acceptable. That's very important. As the forbidden becomes more acceptable in modern culture, the forbidden fruit would be to re-experience the conservative nature of how the poet becomes priest. Return to anthropology. That is experience the forbidden fruit again. Anthropology re-experiences incest, rape, war, murder, mass murder, sacrifice. We could go on, but that is re-experience the forbidden fruit again, is to return to anthropology, ancient forms of projection. Eccentricity is unlikely to be right, but neither is this book trying to be right. It is trying merely to introduce some new possibilities. That's all I'm doing as this lecture series. Let's see if I can introduce some new possibilities, new problems into what it is we think we are experiencing. We already think we know what the problem is. Let me see if there is some new problems that you didn't think about. Hence, the style of the book Paradox is not diluted with the rhetoric of sober qualification. I have not hesitated to pursue new ideas to their ultimate mad consequences, knowing that Freud too seemed mad. Actually, there are some signs that my direction may not be quite so eccentric as it seems when it was being thought out. Among these welcome signs was Herbert Marcuse and William Reich. These guys are extremists. That's fine, but you could tell that they were full of themselves. This is the thing. These guys were poets. They moved into the priest class. They got all these groupies, and they lost track. That's why I don't read them. That's why I believe that reading Norman O'Brown is a great experience. He did not get abducted by the groupie, by the hippie. See, William Reich and Herb Marcuse, they got abducted by groupies, man, by hippies, and they loved it. They loved the attention. We must be. There's something there, like, because that's what's going to happen as the poet goes into the priest. He will be tempted. The church, all the acknowledgement, all the petting, all the compliments, they will take you away from your poetry. So we must wrestle with that, and the best way to wrestle with that is by the book. The book is the unconscious, and the unconscious is the book. So as I'm going through this series, I'm very excited about this because even just rereading this introduction, I believe that I will have more than enough content that will just completely change everything that you think is everything. If that makes any sense. It's that we will go through the hero's journey in the Joseph Campbell sense, even though I won't read any Joseph Campbell. Because even Norman O'Brien said, I will not follow Joseph Campbell anywhere. And that's another guy that got abducted by the hippies. I mean, we can't read these people. We have to go back to these great artists that were reclusive. Because you will feel what it's like to be alone as the poet, wrestling with your unconscious. That's what matters. That's where I want the art to come from. Experiencing the forbidden fruit again. This is just part one, the introduction. Life against death. Over and in.